If we don't have any friends left on the surface, then we need to find an enemy.
It makes no sense!
I'm proud to announce that we work with our partners at Activision. We're going to bring back the original Crash, Crash 2, and Crash Warped, fully remastered from the ground up for PlayStation 4.
Whoa! 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 Whoa!
Crash is back. This set is a must-buy.
Game critics fucking suck.
Crash is here.
It was a gorgeous game.
Domino's did a great advert for it.
It broke new ground!
I don't know if you go back and take a character from PlayStation and can make them relevant beyond the nostalgia. So that remains to be seen.
I mean, I personally, Crash is a great character.
Crash N-Sane is great fun. Real snazzy. I can live with this. Maybe in separate beds, but you know. I want to stress how touching it is to see the popularity of the franchise validated. Everyone welcoming Crash back with open arms. People have missed this cheeky guy. Takes Conker, what, like 12 years to tell a joke while tongue in your ear? Crash just goes and farts outside of Nintendo. I am the proud papa. But then I say, you know, maybe the game is, you know, in a lot of ways, it's, you know, it's, I mean, it could use some work, maybe?
All units, we have a code red. Do not attempt to move or we'll be shooting ourselves.
This word, a very convenient term, a great catch-all title to dismiss any and all criticism levied at the game. Plenty passive-aggressiveness towards anyone daring to suggest things are more than a triviality. He says, passive-aggressively. I don't want to stop anyone's excitement. I mean, I get it. I like this too. I just think there's a discussion here about Crash's polish that's prematurely being closed down. Nitpicking is the job of an artist. They rely on meticulous observations and expertise to create what you want down to the last detail, which is why some are baffled at the carte blanche dismissal of why the details matter. I've seen far too many animator friends spending sleepless nights figuring out the emotional ranges of sporks to not fight this corner. I can't make apologies for the level of detail we'll be going into when evaluating the remaster. It's the only way I can make my case for where it stands up and where we can improve, and maybe offer some new perspective. Besides, I think Vicarious Visions are more than capable of taking one on the chin. They're big boys, right? We saved video games.
Get ready.
Assessing remasters is a tricky business, and that's without the very real debate of their relevancy. You have to weigh up how much of the pros and cons are down to the fundamental experience of the originals, and how much is the new team's contribution. It's easy to call out nostalgia goggles at naysayers and assume that any remaster is by default better, faster, stronger, but that never seems to allow for a quality of judgment. They didn't fuck it that bad. This is why I want to pinpoint Vicarious Vision's specific contributions. We can talk great gameplay and design principles all day, but that doesn't properly delineate their credit on the title. So, the most important news, the gameplay isn't one-to-one with the originals. It's rather close, impressively so, but it's actually altered in many subtle ways. One of the most interesting nuances is that 1, by and large, uses the sequel's physics, but still feels more restrained in motion. I imagine this was to accommodate the original game's build, being that a carbon copy of 2 and 3's physics would not work as a one-size-fits-all solution, and I highly commend that attention to detail. It allows new players to experience a more manageable version of how the series originally developed in playstyle without having to tear themselves into bald. That is, if they can settle with the jumping mechanics. This has already been pointed out by Ding Dong, but I'll go through it here. The jump has a faster drop-off in hang time, and is compounded upon by the rounded hitboxes of enemies or surfaces which now push Crash off of edges. It's preventing some from making what seem like passable jumps, even new players not working off of OG muscle memory. It's tougher to critique than you'd think. Some argue this pushes players and leads to stronger, tighter platforming. I for one relish the new challenge, and think it gives N-Sane an edge in many areas. I mean Dark Souls, you guys die into a children's video- Oh. Incidentally, I don't think that comparison has anything to do with journalists' lack of ability, and everything to do with... What seems questionable is that, on a small scale, the precision can be too inconsistent to conquer indefinitely. with a handful of deaths being beyond the player's overall improvement. It's not that you can't finish the game, it's just that speedrunning's going to be a fucking nightmare. It's not just this mechanic though. When you need to crouch after jumping, there's a delay that makes your high jump feel kinda gimped to access quickly. Ice skating physics are causing a lot of headaches with their low momentum build and top speed, as well as some of the extracurricular options like animal mounts and vehicles feeling a little more finicky than usual. Not terribly so. I think the altered hitboxes are just pronouncing the tighter bits. Ooh. Clemps, what are you doing here? By the same token, there's a lot here that's been firmed up. You have a choice of inversion on the jetpack now, which is bloody marvellous. And the biplane stages are a great improvement on the originals thanks to aiming reticules. We did it, fam. We finally realised the horror of World War I for Crash fucking Bandicoot. Take that, you joyman bastards! The jet ski seems obtrusive at first, but I and a buddy discovered that alternating with the acceleration actually turned this into a much improved experience. It may need tweaking, but looking at the nitty-gritty helps you appreciate how close we really are here. I was certainly able to have a stable and enjoyable playthrough on these controls, and loved being challenged by a platformer again. For the right reasons. I just felt there was still wiggle room for accommodation for clear flaws in the precision, with elements feeling, someone help me out here.
Loose where it should be tight and tight where it should be loose, like the folds on a turkey's neck.
The frustrations are very real, but the admirable thing is how Vicarious Visions have replicated the conversation of the original's challenge from the ground up, with people eager to rise to the game's challenge on its own terms. Easier to determine than their past efforts, trust me on that one.
Just eat less and exercise more.
Perhaps where the remake excels are the wider structural changes. We have autosaving now, as well as the same dynamic difficulty adjustment across the trilogy. You can die and still get all those crates in Crash 1. What a blessing. Playing as Coco is a very generous bonus, and while she's mechanically the same, has enough care put into her animations to make her feel like much more than a reskin. I don't really understand why she isn't allowed to face down bosses, but she's a busy girl. Look at us, all living in our heathen fire-fearing caves while she ascends. There is no need to walk like foolish men when Fembandy. She's what, like 6? Now all 3 games support time trials for each level, with relics to collect which just doubled the lifespan. Better still is that you can now upload your best times and compete with the online leaderboards. I think this is an ingenious decision, and having known a community of Crash fans who actively competed over the originals feels like such an accomplishment for them. Crates that used to take 8 hits in the first 2 games now only take 5, like how they did in Warped. Retriable bonus rounds and crate counters have been added to 1, as has this great looking new pause screen, touches which just help unify the trilogy further. Note that all the maps move in the same direction, so you're not fucking bouncing back and forth. Jesus God, stop. What blew my feeble brain were the contextual changes to the original's limitations. While the hints on the long-ass loading screen are kind of obnoxious, that's a bit more than a hint, mate. Hello. The ones placed within the game are very clever, and improve on some of the original's downright stubbornness. As you can see, some exploits have been graciously left in, with one exception. Gone, but not forgotten. That's great! My favourite is one based on an old issue where, in the engine fight, you shot Wumpa from, like, your pits or the fabric of reality. It was never clear. Now Crash actually throws them. Such closure. Somewhere 6-year-old me is, well, he's probably chewing on an action man. He's not actually thinking about this. This stuff is where you see the love pour through. Vicarious Visions made changes that really tip the scales on the game's replay value, as well as show the genuine consideration for what might be missing. That's the kind of stuff a remaster should be about, adding to the experience without losing the original appeal. Unfortunately, this video's still going.
90s polygon, Burke phenomenon.
Oi, what a hill to die on, the aesthetics of a fucking rat. Consistently, the thing getting the highest praise has been the visuals. Everyone seems enamoured by the leap to 4K and the heapings of technology and sparkle. Well, mostly everyone.
Oh my god.
There's no fucking lighting on him.
Instead of dimming the room, we lit it up even more.
It is weird that it's so bright in here.
Boy, did this make folks mad. But I gotta speak up, because friends, this could be better. It would be very dumb and very stupid, however, to sell Vicarious Visions short in this department. I was impressed by a lot of the work on display here. Their time on Skylanders has actually benefited the levels. The toy-like, clearly segmented polishes of the stages suits the focus on rhythm and shape that the Crash levels have and need. A lot of these come across beautifully in the remakes, with most of the levels in 1 and Warped looking better than I could have ever hoped for. I like the updates to the soundtrack, for the most part. Had me juking, had me jiving. Doesn't beat when Brio rocks up to the club, of course, but whatever. It's more the design theory put into practice here that seems less than kosher. The visuals are shiny, the tech is more complex, but that's a natural benefit that comes with the time that's passed and the resources they have available for this occasion. In terms of finding the expertise and execution compared to the original, I strongly disagree that they're working at the same level of ingenuity. Crash's original graphics have plenty room for improvement, but were far from typical for PS1 software. One of the reasons it stood out amongst the competition was because the team at Naughty Dog knew how to work around the console's limitations to deliver consistently appealing visuals, thanks to the guidance of professional artists and a focus on graphical trickery. This is why it doesn't make sense to lump it in as being dated like any other PlayStation game at the time. Here's Crash. Now here's Bubsy.
Come on, come on!
You see? The remake style seems to rely on a sense of realism in both the textures and lighting, a lot of it generated by their unique engine. Unfortunately, I don't believe that's the logical next step to remastering these visuals, and their grasp of those concepts don't seem quite robust enough to produce a cohesive style overall. Lighting cartoons requires an implied approach. Check this scene out from Roger Rabbit, a film that helped fuel a lot of the energy that went into making Crash.
Hey, Eddie! Boy, nothing.
Roger is a flat cartoon, and has to look like such, but here he has to inhabit a 3D environment. The shading on him is far from realistic lighting. It's more a suggestion compared to what that might actually look like. We get the gist of the effect, and the fact that it has this soft feathering gives it its own unique quality evocative of the vignetted world Roger comes from. This is the thing. You don't create realism, you create believability without sacrificing clarity. Sometimes this has been considered and looks great, but often the new Crash botches this concept because it relies too heavily on the lighting engine's automatic effects without competent staging. I can't tell you how many times I saw dulled out eyes, or Crash bleeding into his environment's colour scheme, or where a character was less prominent than some background detail. This didn't used to be an issue. The Crash models used clever fake lighting techniques etched into the models and environments. Bright, vivid colours on characters helped them pop against the less intense, more detailed backgrounds, ensuring they were the focus of an image. Hence the extremely contrasty shadows that used to crop up in the old games. Textures used to mimic effects in illustrative ways to make up for the lack of graphical power, but actually ended up slotting in perfectly with the cartoon aesthetic they were going for. So, when the remake uses water physics that seem kind of off, or overblown finishes to barely shiny surfaces, it ends up being distracting. That's not ice, that's glass. That's not mud, that's water. Oh, and to all remaster devs out there, easy on the bloom. It overpowers images and serves as a lazy replacement for making things seem intense. And it looks cheap. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I agree with Cad Icarus on this particular point.
I don't feel like the PS4 is being pushed, but I can see the PS1 being pushed.
Actually, he seems to have rescinded this, so I think he got away with it, don't worry. That focus on surface detail doesn't seem to trickle down to the overall shapes of the characters. Its predecessors' poses were clear and offered some extreme expressions that were easier to read thanks to a lack of cluttered detail. Always felt pushed to their limits. You take a look at the two Crashes and their basic stance and it's just way more vanilla now. Crash looks so dynamic in every pose of the OG, his angularity giving him an energetic edge, the sharp lines finalizing the poses, like a futurist painting. When it feels overladen with all this new shit, looks kinda weird. The characters at large are fighting this. They've basically taken the PS1 models and literalized all the details, which unfortunately sends us into some uncanny territories. Engine's flat textures did not translate well to realistic ones. That's like stylization 101. Solids and lines read differently, and anything that accentuates the otherness of a texture, like lighting, can impact the design's readability. That's why a CG movie drawn in a flat style will always feel more weighted than a line drawing, which is not actually a criticism. Like them, they really shouldn't have been afraid of flatter looking textures for their supposedly cartoony characters. Why do you think these still look so good? Why do you think this made us all go My assumption was that they would try to bring the original Zembillas drawings or the renders to life, like this rockin' concept of Tiny. Look how amped up the design on this guy is. Those sharp triangle eyes, the huge saber teeth. There's a lot of assorted sharp shapes playing off each other in his face to make it look more pointed and menacing. The new one's alright, but he's got these soft grandpa dentures and boring normal eyes. Man needs a rest, like maybe a hot cocoa or something. It's got nothing to do with a lack of talent or potential, because some of these guys are spot on. Coco has completely benefited from the revamp, looking and moving better than ever before. Aww. It's actually often easier to read her against the environments. Even her spin is deformed better. I think Papu is the strongest redesign of the bunch, relying on simple shapes and bold design choices that look way better than the original. I just wish that was always the case. Well, golly, this guy seems pretty upset. Well, at least he can't complain about the animation. That would be pretty dumb. Oh, lad. Actually, the cutscenes are pretty good, reinterpreting the original actions without veering off script. Thank God. The extra weight and heft does give these characters some amazing physicality we hadn't thought of before. I love Engine's missile-induced limp. Yet, often they only move at one pace. Yes, there's a lot of fluid motion, but it's not varied by as much abrupt or punchy stuff. Everything takes too long to trail off and settle, even in the more abrupt moments. Moderation and stillness are a big part of cartoon yucks. People relate the new visuals to Disney, when Crash owes so much more to the bluntness of the Looney Tunes. But don't look at me, check out Harvard grad Bugs Bunny at work. Meanwhile, some in-game animations now seem oddly stilted, with what seem like disappointingly tweened motions. Tweening, incidentally, is when the animator uses the engine to fill some frames of a movement rather than doing all of it manually, and that seems more obvious than it should be in spots. I think in Tiny's fight it actually makes him seem way floatier than before. There's a lot of additional character quirks embellished to make up for this, but misses out often on the great choices present in the original. Check out the slow burn on this Dingo Dial entrance.
Break out the butter. I'm gonna make toast.
But in the remake...
Break out the butter. I'm gonna make toast.
Same could be said for N-Tropy's old sense of mania.
Now you're on my time, you little skunk. Give me the crystals. Now you're on my time, you little skunk! Give me the crystals!
We're losing some characters through this kind of obvious direction. I bet you enjoyed Embryo, right? Watching him swing about cackling, oh, what a crazy guy. Well, the point was that he was a superior scientist to Cortex with a major case of submissiveness. This manifested as a stutter, which, in the second game, he actively tries to fight against to warn Crash of Cortex's treachery. That's why he gets annoyed at himself with this line.
I can use them to focus a laser. A laser beam. I can use them to focus a laser. Ah, yes, a laser beam.
It's not completely absent, it just kind of seems lost in the muddle. Love the voice though.
Yes, I wrote that line earlier.
And while we're on a complete roll of alienating people, I don't understand why so many simple effects from the original are gone either, other than because they too seem to be relying solely on the engine filling in the gaps. Check the sick layered warpins on 2's level entrances. Really? The original Crash 2 warp room holograms look particularly stylish, not to mention the white noise effects and fade-ins they were able to get in there. Now we're left with a badly lit room so that everything blends together on one surface, with a lazy pop-in including, quite worryingly, the neutral expressions of the characters between swaps. Again, the original hid this. Is that a nitpick? Because that's someone's job, man. To an animator or artist, it's imperative to get these right. They're the most prominent places your characters are shown in the game, setting the scene between bursts of content, and we see them a lot. To get that wrong is such a fumble, and why to many people it wouldn't even begin to find itself on something as low as a list of minor nitpicks. If none of this was done so well in the original titles, I probably wouldn't have minded at all. This might be made worse by the fact that almost everything I've mentioned here, the concepts, it's been mentioned by them.
You know, Looney Tunes, Animaniacs, Who Framed Roger Rabbit.
Vicarious visions give the impression of being a very aware bunch of bunnies. Through most of the prior footage revealed, a lot of criticism was raised that ended up being implemented almost exactly as suggested, which the fans so against the criticisms ate up regardless. Now we could say this was always their plan, except for the interviews where they've credited the fans' complaints for being what convinced them to make those decisions to begin with.
People would catch everything. I mean, I got people sending me tweets about, you know, that Wumpa Fruit collection sound, not quite right. Can you...
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah.
Harsh critics out there.
It doesn't really fill me with confidence for your initial judgment, especially not when this was the hot take you went with. I should be kind. I'm not even going to go into the font. Look, I can put a lot of these quirks aside and enjoy the great new feats on display, but then something really simple and its incompetence shows up in an obvious spot, and I'm left wondering why the extra effort wasn't put into getting that right first. It's such a case of give and take. One step forward, one step back. Funny chicken giant, creepy old sex slaves. In their interviews, Vivi has shown that they understand these principles, but every time they go to put it into practice, it just comes out limp.
That's how Crash got to where he is today. Just a lot of bravado and blue shorts.
Gosh, this video's been tough. I didn't want to rag on Vicarious Visions here. On the contrary, my respect for them has gone up considerably since our last encounter. It's the first time I've seen the Crash gameplay considered in such a genuinely thorough way. There's just the sense that people are perhaps over-exaggerating the achievements here. The game is better than expected, but still bears the marks of second stringers, and they're lucky they have such a ready, overzealous audience to cover their tracks.
Hey guys, take it from a close sister series that Vicarious Visions is really trying hard to please you all, yet you guys still want to bitch. If you cucks keep that up, then you might as well prepare for the cancellation of the series.
Oh, this is a real person, so this idea I've seen floating around that criticizing the franchise will only lead to it disappearing again. That's not what happened before. Publishers like Activision slashed budgets and deadlines for studios, leading to mediocre work in advertising, and a decreased interest in products. That was the self-destructive cycle that led to the end of Crash 9 years ago, and I can't help but feel it could, should either party get complacent over this accomplishment, happen again. The Only Plays gang surmised my fears on this pretty well.
This isn't being developed by Naughty Dog. This is still the people who are responsible for a lot of those Crash games.
Well, this is good, though.
Because it's based off the original games.
Well, maybe they'll learn shit from remaking it.
They won't.
I don't think they will.
Now, the difference is, I am seeing a change from both Vicarious Visions and Activision. A clearer direct line to fan feedback, and a stronger understanding of what they're sitting on now. I'm also seeing a huge amount of people who, after years of kvetching about how a franchise was being overlooked in favour of boring shooters and badly designed games, now find the same low standards completely copacetic for their favourite brand. No, Crash wasn't just a cartoon video game. It was the game that raised the visual bar and inspired a lot of people to go out and do likewise, and still puts in more of an effort than required. It can be improved on, but technical enhancements are no replacement for artistic expertise. I just suspect that, in an attempt to overcompensate, VV just ended up amplifying how far they really have to go. Now, this doesn't mean I don't appreciate what they've made, especially when compared to the likes of Yooka-Laylee. That idea that Crash gameplay is now something fun and in demand is kind of exciting, and opens up the door for bigger and better experiences in the future. That's on them. They did that. Good job. I just hope that, without Naughty Dog's bedrock, these flaws don't suddenly deepen. You got Crash back. Great. Now for God's sake, make it count, huh? Haha, Spyro Remaster! Oh, it's finally over. God. It's really warm. Oh, if you like this, then make sure to check out the other stuff. More importantly, there's a full list of changes between the games up from my friends at Crashmania. Well worth reading if you want a comprehensive list. Oh, I want to give a shout out to the Only Plays gang for the bits I pilfered from their discussions. If someone shows this to them, then, dear God, I probably made it much worse. But never mind, eh? After all, what are bridges for, if not to be burnt?